Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Centre for Legal Innovation's ReinventED Legal Business, the Case Studies series. Absolutely delighted to welcome today Prue Tyler. Hi, Prue. Good to see you. Prue is the founder and director of Shift Advisory and Shift Compliance, and we're going to learn all about the Shift Advisory and Shift Compliance journey today. As folks know, this series is all about focusing on legal businesses doing their legal business differently. And this is no exception. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, Prue, but want to hand over to you to start and kick us off with kind of, I guess, your story, but also the Shift Advisory story as well. So welcome and let's go.
Thanks, Yuri. I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the series. It's really, really great to have the opportunity to do this, and it's been given me a great opportunity to have a pause and just think about our journey the past 5 years as well. So I think I'll start with my personal journey, because I think that kind of obviously dovetails into the Shift journey. So I've had quite a wide-ranging legal career. I started in family law and then moved to public and corporate law in the big firms, and then moved out to a boutique sort of corporate firm where I had my first child. I then moved in-house to work part-time and juggle being a parent, as a lot of people do. And I loved that. I loved the team, the collegiality, and I really loved being close to the business. It was a practical move in a lot of ways, but it just really made me realise how much I enjoyed the in-house lifestyle and the slightly different way of practicing. I then unusually went back to private practice after a few years in-house, which is an unusual move. People don't often do that, but there was lots of things I loved about the firm. So I went back to work part-time, having 3 children under 5 at that point.
Oh my goodness.
It was a busy time and quite an unusual one to explain to people. I love the work, the team, the culture, and I love lots of things I loved about the firm. I also loved, even the sort of the growing of the junior staff and managing younger people as well. And I loved the client engagement. So I did all those great things about private practice all there, but what I found hard was the boundaries and the juggle. It didn't feel like there was a natural place for me in private practice at that point. The genesis for Shift was actually at that time I was pausing on what I wanted for my career, having worked so hard in the early roles, and also having the shared experience of other friends wanting interesting work, the great people, the projects, the kind of the idea of that you're not stagnating in your career, but also having a bit of a professional development and a career path as well. At that time, I came across all these new law models that were popping up, and they had been, established over the world for some time by then. Axiom and a lot of the ones that I think was Lawyers on Demand in Australia, etc., and got really excited by the idea of this. So I left the firm in 2017, and I took another in-house role 3 days a week to de-risk setting Shift up. So I kept working as an in-house lawyer while I was growing the business, which was challenging in some ways, but actually it was kind of key to the success of the business in another way, because it was in another financial services firm where I went in-house. So I was very much like at the coalface of seeing what the needs were in the businesses. And obviously legal works very closely with compliance and risk in those businesses. So I sort of saw the same pain points in the legal team as across to the risk and compliance teams. So the vision I had when I took this plunge was I did this in the early stages with another person. We had this vision of senior lawyers wanting to work differently, senior risk and compliance people, and often ex-lawyers also wanting to add value to business in a different way. I felt there wasn't an obvious place for senior lawyers and firms if they weren't on the path to partnership or didn't want to, for whatever reason, be managers. And I've also felt like there was a gap of the secondments of the senior people that these businesses needed, these in-house teams, particularly in financial services. It's subject matter experts. It's quite a senior skill set that they're after, and the secondments from the bigger firms, often it wasn't a great fit for them to be sending their senior resource out on a secondment on an endless basis. So I felt there really was a gap. And I saw myself and so many of the lawyers I knew having done the hard yards in their career, and then they're at a crossroads when their life changes, and it felt like a real waste that these people were actually opting out of working all together because it felt so binary, the choices. Questions like, how do I have a meaningful career, but how do I set the boundaries? So that was kind of where we that was the genesis for Shift. So we connect senior lawyers and regulatory change and risk and compliance consultants with the clients who require them. All of our people are really experienced, as I say. Most have a minimum of 10 years PQE, but actually a lot of them have more than 15, 20, or even 30 years experience. They hit the ground running, they handle what needs to be handled from day one, and it's kind of our real value proposition. And I mean, the response has been really, really positive. We were really nervous. There were a lot of naysayers when we set it up saying New Zealand's far too small for this business. We've all thought about it. Obviously, all the big law firms who talk to their counterparts overseas have thought about it quite hard as well. It turns out, there is demand. We do offer this sort of third way to access top quality legal advice. So it's sort of a middle ground between instructing a firm on the one hand and recruiting directly on the other. And Shift, as the name suggests, it's about shifting the paradigm of how legal services can traditionally be provided and received. So as a blend of the external and in-house legal support, given the seniority and the quality of our people. And so while I'm just focused quite a lot on the client experience and getting this more cost-effective person, none of the risk, I mean, it's actually our lawyers that this is all about, because I think this is what I was really wanting to do, is actually provide a different pathway for senior lawyers to be able to practice and set some boundaries and still participate, because otherwise what a waste, right? And I think and we are complementary to the traditional firms. We're really not in competition. There'll always be a need for external advice from a great firm. But sometimes for corporates, the best way to get things done is having an experienced person on the ground in the team, talking directly with the business and building those relationships. It really is hard to do from the outside. And these people can manage the external law firm in a really effective way because they're talking the same language. So our proposition to our lawyers is about being involved in these interesting and challenging projects, but on their terms. So we're really transparent with clients about hours our lawyers can offer, and this was pre-COVID. It's obviously made it a lot easier for us now, but from the very beginning, we were talking about, the people can work, 20 hours, 15 hours. Like, we're just kind of, this is what you get, this is what we can offer, but this person will come in and you'll get real value for those hours. So we're really about that control and flexibility and empowerment. And the clients get it. That is a relationship of trust. They are happy to have these great people to take some stuff off their hands, and they accept that flexibility and those terms. So yeah, that's kind of a snapshot of what we're currently doing. I mean, obviously we've evolved to RegTech, and we can talk about that a bit more too, and Shift Compliance is offering. But that was the genesis, yeah.
Prue, just to unpack that a little bit at this point, and I know we've got a bunch of stuff to discuss today, but the services that you're offering, it sounds like the advisory doesn't just involve lawyers, but as you're kind of showing here on the screen, it involves a bunch of disciplines that will come to the clients that you're speaking with in terms of their particular problem. So it's lawyers and other professionals that may or may not have a legal background. Am I right in pulling that out?
Right, yeah. So what I sort of saw, and I think it was really what I saw actually when I was at the law firm in the financial services space, was the requests for support from the financial services firms were not really purely legal requests often. It was a lot of compliance and risk support. And the Australian Royal Commission inquiry into the banks obviously flowed to New Zealand, and we had our own inquiry. And a lot of that work, that conduct and culture work, and the regulatory change work, it needed some nuance. It wasn't necessarily straight legal skills that are required. So that was where a lot of the secondments that were being requested to the law firms were not the right place to be requesting those people. Like, and it wasn't the right fit, in fact, to be getting a lawyer that's on a budget and a billable basis to be going in and doing compliance obligation sets, or setting up the controls and the framework. So that's where I saw from really early on, actually, I thought that was also an offering, and it has turned out to be a really, like, it's a really sort of good synergy with the legal, because and a lot of the people are either ex-lawyers or ex-in-house lawyers who have moved across into this space, or we've actually got people who've been in this space for a while in permanent roles, and for the same reasons as our lawyers, they've wanted to move to contracting and sort of work on this sort of project basis.
So what would be their background, Prue, just to give us a bit of an idea of that?
Some of them are more traditionally from like the sort of KPMGs or the EYs, so they've worked with those bigger firms doing that sort of work on a much bigger basis. But actually, probably the most of them have actually been in permanent roles in the businesses, and they're wanting a change of the way they work. So and obviously contracting in that space is a bit more common than, you know, obviously legal contracting a lot harder, and it's a bit of a newer concept. These people have done it, but they haven't done it under any structure or with a community, and that's what we offer these people, is to bring, and it's sort of what we offer as a community for them, and a way to really capture the knowledge and work with the lawyers as well. So it's not just you're sort of on your own going in on a contract. We're offering that sort of umbrella under which they do that.
So they'd be specialist risk managers, specialist compliance,
privacy,
privacy.
So anti-money laundering obviously is a massive one. So when we set up in 2018, that legislation had come in to capture law firms and real estate agents. So a bit of our work that first year was actually helping those businesses understand that legislation, which, you know, the banks, etc., had been under since 2009. So it was a bit of a change for them as well.
So your advisory might be providing any one of these specialists, and I'm putting lawyers into that category of specialists as well, or a team that you would construct for people.
We have provided more than one person to places, but generally it's often an extra resource or an extra person to join a team to push forward a project, and it might be that with that particular subject matter expertise. Or it might, and sometimes it's just to help with BAU if there's a maternity cover or they can't recruit. Sometimes as basic as that, but also always these people are coming with experience in the market on the ground. And I think that's the sort of difference. And obviously it's going to be slightly more cost efficient than going to one of the big four accounting firms, because also they're not, again, same as the law firms, not necessarily wanting to send their senior people. So what you're getting for that person is going to be someone who's got that really kind of a doer, because actually a lot of the work is exactly that, but it's not a doer at a junior level. It's someone who actually understands it. And I mean, that was absolutely the case for the banks, and it's continuing to be with the conduct work. So that under the Australian Royal Commission work that flows to New Zealand.
But it's a skill set that your folks have also developed, right? Because they're working, if not actually in a multidisciplinary team, certainly having a very sharp understanding of what the specialist roles are and what they bring to your advisory as well, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's right. And I think that's where the strength of the business is starting to evolve, is that we've got people who've been on 4 and 5 and 6 roles. So they're sort of capturing that knowledge and the approach and sharing that. You know, we've obviously got the community that we create, that people come to the CPD trainings and they're talking to each other and kind of it. So you're not just sort of out there on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you're you may have created the most significant and largest side hustle known to humankind with Shift Advisory, but I love how it's evolved. And I'm wondering if we could just spend a couple of minutes on that as well, kind of your thought process in evolving the business, because you were effectively kind of working 2 businesses in parallel, weren't you?
Yeah, well, so I was sort of in a business doing a couple of days a week in the legal team, and absolutely. And what was, I mean, it was people were sort of saying, "Oh, that's mad! You should be in the business. You need to be growing it." But actually, I think that was like reflecting back, and there were times where it was just an incredibly difficult juggle. But actually, it really gave the offering for Shift Advisory, the law firm, legs, because I was constantly reminded of what in-house teams need and what they don't need. I was seeing secondees from the big firms coming in as second years, and they were absolutely out of their depth, and they were actually a massive time suck for the business. So I was seeing on the ground what they need. So I could empathize too with our in-house lawyers because I'm on the ground with them. But equally for the clients, I could talk quite sensibly, and I still can, but at the time too, like about the actual regulatory change coming at them and how they're kind of grappling with that sort of flow of work, and actually talking sensibly about what the cultural fit is, because I think one of our things we really try to pride ourselves on is the right fit. So not just providing you a lawyer, it's the person that will fit your team. The in-house teams are very low turnover. They're really like a bit of a what do they call it? A family, a work family. And so you've got to put the right person into that family. You can't, and I think that's kind of one of the things that we really take a lot of time thinking about when we do place people.
And how do you do that? I mean, I know we're going to get onto the values, which are, I know, very important to your business as well in a second, but is that about it? Obviously it's a deep understanding and knowledge of the business that you're placing folks into, but I imagine very significant in that is the relationships that you're building with people in those businesses as well, to be able to make that match.
No, that's right. And so, and I think that's where, I mean, you're talking about those relationships. I mean, we haven't been as good as others at our marketing, but actually when I think about what our marketing is, it's about those relationships. I think it's those really that sort of on the ground, face-to-face catch-ups, and that's kind of what we've really focused on. So I think, and I think that then it's sort of a long game, isn't it? Because people may go and they might find the right role and they'll stay there, but they then do become a client, or at least a cheerleader for shift in the organisation, because they've been there and done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the other question that comes out of this, and I just want to ask you before, if I may, before you move on, is just your own work-life balance. I mean, I'm listening to all that you had going on, and I'm feeling a bit exhausted while I'm listening to this. So how do you manage that yourself? How do you stay sane with all that you had going on, but frankly, all you've still got going on, day to day today?
Yeah, and I think I was reflecting on that because I think COVID, New Zealand had a 4-month lockdown this time last year. And I think that really threw things for all of us, because the whole work-life balance became very blurred, and work just was on all the time because there was so many distractions with the children at home and just running a house and being at home. So I think that kind of skewed it, because I think we were setting boundaries before that period, and then we were suddenly back into this sort of crisis mode, and then having to move out of that this year has been a really interesting journey, because actually we were working incredibly hard, and harder probably in COVID than we've ever worked, and all of our lawyers were too. That was our biggest concern with COVID, and that included me and our HQ, our key sort of top team. And so that has been quite a journey. I mean, I sometimes, I do work really hard, but I also feel like I've got awesome flexibility. Like I do, I do go to watch my daughter at funk and my son at soccer, and then I log on at night because I've been off for 3 hours in the afternoon. Like I do, and so, but it's about kind of modeling that stuff. It's about doing delay send on emails on a Sunday afternoon, but actually that's my time when no one else is emailing me, and I do it. So I think it is flexibility in the true sense of kind of doing it when it works for you. But also setting those boundaries and being quite strict about them as well. And even just finding, as we're coming back out of lockdown and more into the face-to-face meetings, I'm realizing I can't quite do what I used to do in terms of the face-to-face catch-ups and traveling all over town, and it's just kind of doesn't work anymore. So it's kind of adjusting to listening to your body a bit about how you can manage all that, because I think it's really easy. It was easy in lockdown to work really, really hard. And I think we all, I mean, that was absolutely our concern with our lawyers, was the no natural breaks, starting early, finishing early. Everyone knew you were online, everyone knew you went out. So the client demands really increased as well, and the timeliness of stuff.
Yeah. And I want to get into that a bit more, but I know you want to kind of maybe jump back into the presentation that I've interrupted.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's fine. I guess I was kind of thinking about moving on to sort of some of the challenges that we have found. I mean, I think probably one of the trickier pieces was about there was no rule book, there was no guide. This hadn't really properly been done before in New Zealand. I mean, interestingly, Juno, our main sort of competitor, but also colleague, set up similar timing to us, which was really awesome actually. But it really, and so sort of navigating the legal regulatory requirements and the unknown, and just because it hadn't been done before, it doesn't mean it can't be done. It was tricky. And engaging with the Law Society and just explaining the model. Obviously, there's precedent for the model overseas, but obviously our framework is different. All of that complexity was it was hard, and it doesn't, it's not a natural place for a lawyer to be going navigating the unknown and not being able to play by a rule book. But kind of getting comfortable too that having that kind of confidence, I guess, to push forward, thinking, well, there is a model, there is a demand, there is a sort of wasted talent that is sitting there that can be used in a way that suits them. So yeah, and it kind of goes to what you're offering, Terry, with the Centre for Legal Innovation. I mean, I think that it was just amazing, the support and the collaboration that being on the side of the market garners. So I've just had this incredibly generous people giving me their time, both in New Zealand and offshore, to discuss the model and understand how it works. Yeah,
I was going to ask you that. I mean, what sort of role has, I'm going to call them mentors for want of a better expression. How important has, because I think that when you're leading a business as you are, when you're trying to make some tough decisions, particularly for you, it was almost a new a green site, really, in terms of the playing fields, right? How important is it for you to seek out and find mentors? And I guess, did that happen for you accidentally almost, or was it something that, no, you were proactive, very planned about finding folks? How did that work?
I guess I think of this in two parts. So one of them was that we appointed a business advisor, he's actually an accounting firm, but they really do business advisory, and he came on board with us about a year and he's been on the journey with us the whole way. And I've sort of, he's been a mentor, not in the legal sense, but in the actual strategic sense and the business side of the business. And he's been incredibly valuable. He comes to our board meetings and he has been really a mentor for me in a lot of ways. But then in terms of the people in the business, I mean, I've always maintained relationships as I've left jobs, and really particularly senior woman I've kept in touch with. But Jodie Baker at Zakia has been a real incredibly generous with her time. Like, we just had about Zakia, and she sort of said, well, should we do monthly catch-ups? And I was like, yes, please. And it's been amazing, because she's obviously in a tech business. It's slightly different, but there's a lot of similarities. She's got the background from Hive, and I've just learned an enormous amount from her. I sort of listen and I do come to those sessions with questions. And equally with Simmons Adaptive in the UK, Sarah Thompson's been amazing. She again, we just do these monthly catch-ups, and I hear what the trends over there, and it just kind of makes what we're doing really relevant to the rest of the world. Like, you can get very insular and very New Zealand, and it's really interesting to hear other people talking about a lot of the same issues, but obviously I think the UK is a wee bit ahead of us, and so is Aussie, so it is interesting to see where things are going. But also just in terms of it can be lonely being a sole business owner, so having someone to sort of bounce stuff off that's really is confidential and under a kind of silence. And I mean, they'll never know the names of the people, they're not interested, but it's navigating those questions with those women are awesome. And I think I've just found those guys incredibly useful. Same with actually Titus at Quorum in Singapore. He and I started at Russell McVeigh together back in the day, and so I kind of know him from there. But again, he's incredibly generous with his time, and I mean, I try to do the same with some of the people setting up here on their own or doing different things. Like there's two younger lawyers who, well, not younger, but people have gone out on their own doing different things that I commit to a catch up with, because I think it's all about that kind of sharing that knowledge, and the collaboration is just so important, because it is, and then it's the same, it's sort of the same philosophy behind the legal tech series we did earlier in the year. It's about like just sharing the knowledge and sharing the awareness of the stuff, because these teams are so busy, they don't have see that as actually a role that we play.
Yes, but you make well many fantastic points, but a couple, if I can pull them out. I think we often don't spend enough time thinking about the fact that we're leading our businesses and therefore people are looking to us, but where are the people that we can go and have that chat with who are in a similar boat, but also probably finding folks that will challenge your thinking and challenge you to kind of think differently or to see a different point of view on something that you're looking at. And I'm sure the folks that you're speaking to, knowing what I do of them, they would have done all of those things and more.
Totally. No, and just some really like helpful, really like basic practical tips about stuff like how to get your followers on LinkedIn, like really basic.
Yes,
and then and also going, oh, you catastrophizing this issue, it's not that big a deal, I've seen it 100 times before. Which is cool, because I think you can, I think sometimes being on your own, it can be a bit like you can kind of panic a little bit sometimes.
Of course. Of course. And at the same time, I guess feeling the responsibility to everyone that's working with you to, provide that consistency and stability and not kind of, be losing your cool when things are maybe not going 1,000% to plan, which is probably something every day. I appreciate in a legal business as well. Fantastic. And I wanted to, if I may, just touch on your values here as well, because you've, I guess, kind of mentioned those and how important and fundamental and foundational they are to your business. But tell us a little bit more about maybe how they came to being and how you see those play out in your business every day.
I'd love to. I think this was something we've spent some time on a few strategy days. So we have thought quite hard about these, and I think the community one is probably, in some ways, it's kind of what we're really all about, because I think in our community is just so much more than our lawyers. It's our alumni, it's our clients, and we try to kind of foster that community by the CPD events. So a lot of, and back in the day they're in person, but obviously COVID in some ways made it even more important to be, but also it was easier to do a webinar and do the catch-ups and do the stuff we offered. So we've done TDO classes, we've done quite a bit of wellness stuff we've done the last year, and lockdown, actually it was great timing in the end, even though we were panicking about it. It was a 6-week wellness series, and that was actually just awesome timing. And that is the sort of thing we do try to provide, because I think you can go on contract, and I think people say that, but what is quite nice about this, especially if you're actually considering leaving full-time employment, this provides something, that piece to the puzzle that I think people are really often quite reluctant to leave behind. And look, you're going and you're joining a team, and that's a great, and that's one of the things I loved about continuing to work in the legal teams while I was growing, because I love that collegiality, but that's what we're trying to offer in as well. So that's the community one. And then I guess authenticity, as I think I was talking about, is really like not pretending we're something we're not, sticking with sticking to really being true to who people are, and really backing our people too. Like, I think it's quite easy, the old unconscious bias, to hire people like us and people like you, and just get a whole lot of replicas of people we know, and that's absolutely not what we've done. We really kind of, and we're really brave with clients about that. We're saying, she can be awkward, so to do the interviews, but she is such a great lawyer, and she's actually just so lovely, and she'll warm up. She's just a terrible interviewer. We kind of do that, because also the CVs at our level, kind of, they almost speak for themselves. They're just awesome, but it's about that fit, and it's kind of just talking about what that is with people as well. And I mean, and it's about us as well, and what in terms of our authenticity, it's about that control thing. So it's about, I want to work 20 hours a week, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I don't necessarily have children, but I might have volunteering on a Friday, which, because our people are senior and they might want to give back on a Friday, or do all sorts of different things. And it's just kind of like, this is it. This is what you do, literally what you see is what you get. Because I think, I feel like at the law firms often it's so much trying to please the client, and I think we are trying to, but we're also saying, well, this is what we can offer you.
Absolutely. And the other values that are there, I guess we've spoken to them, but anything particular you want to pull out of those?
I mean, I think it's the empowerment is about bringing people back to the workforce too, or making them one of the, I mean, obviously in this role, one of the great privileges I have is I get to sit and talk to a lot of people, right? Like I get to kind of hear people's stories, and so many of the stories I'm not enough, I can't fit, I don't fit the model. And I'm trying to be at home with the children, I'm trying to have this big career that I've worked for the last 10 years, and I'm just going to opt out because it's too hard. And I really find it a really important part of our role and what we do is to say, no, you can. There's actually another way to be able to participate in the workforce and be really satisfied in a professional sense, but also go home and be the mum you want to be, because it's not necessarily either or. And I think the empowerment one's probably in some ways it's the most dear to my heart, because I feel like what we've done is try and give an opportunity to people to still participate, but in a way that suits their lives. I think that's really important to me. And it's sort of slightly ironic sometimes with my hours, especially in the early stages of what I was doing. But I think I'm really true to that, about that empowerment piece. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And like freedom is about the control, really. To me, it's like I feel like it's about controlling the boundaries and controlling what you're doing. But the problem solve is important too, because I think what we do offer is more than just the freedom and control. It's actually really interesting work. An opportunity to dip in and out of industries, because you quickly become a telco lawyer if you're in an in-house team or you've been in private practice, and actually a lot of the skills, by the time you're 15 years qualified, they're pretty transferable. And actually for the client, you get a different lens. If you've got a commercial contracts lawyer who's been in a telco going into a bank, the commercial contracts are kind of similar. They're issues, but actually you've got a different lens and a slightly different approach to things. And I think that actually, it's helpful for the client, but it is also it allows that lawyer to broaden their skill set and kind of put another, string to their bow,
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you may have encountered as you've grown. So we've touched on some of them, but if you could almost try to consolidate them or summarize them, and I'm wrapping this in kind of a tips and traps, what to look out for folks that might be listening. What were they, and how did you overcome them?
I've definitely given this a bit of thought, and I think obviously I've covered off the legal regulatory navigation piece, and that was hard, but I think that's about just kind of being confident and getting the right advice. I think one thing we did that I like looking back, I would have done differently, is we said yes to far too many things in year one. I think we didn't know if this was a viable business, and so I think a lot of small businesses do this, but we sort of was like, yeah, sure, and then we would get off the phone and go, oh my goodness, who? And I think in that year we did a lot of, actually it was that AML work, and it was tricky, it was challenging, and we actually it was something that, like, on reflection, what we've quickly realized what our real strength is and what we're really good at, and it's about sticking to that and doing it really, really well. I think sometimes that whole kind of scattergun approach can be quite distracting and means you're not doing anything that well if you're doing too much. And I think
but is that a bit of a process as well, Prue? Like, is it, it's almost like having 20/20 vision in hindsight, I guess, but do you need to be conscious of it, but do you have to go through it? Like, there's no way around it?
We do, because I think we didn't really know how it would evolve. Like, it was, I remember our first client coming through. I was actually at the mountain. We were down skiing, and we were like, oh my gosh, and then the next one came in, and I think it was, as you say, it was an evolution about saying yes to stuff and then working out what you can and can't do, and how the skill sets work. Like, turning out some of the people from bank teams who had been doing this stuff in a very practical sense and not necessarily the right people to be drafting the documents. Like, it really was a learning journey as well, but it was tricky. So it's but we were from day one convinced there was a market for the legal and non-legal support. It was just about the legal,
and you were right.
And
turns out.
But then the legal training does feed into that. Like, a lot of our lawyers do want to do that stuff as well. The other challenge, I think, was educating the market on the model. It's new. Some clients got it, like some of them, especially like with Australia, a lot of the Kiwi returners have been in UK firms for the last 10 years or in-house. They just like totally knew this model. They're like, great, about time, just totally understood it. Others didn't. And so we spent a lot of time explaining where we sat in the market and to fill a gap. Super senior resource, it's not FTE, it's not external legal support, you know, and trying to understand the pricing and all of the way it worked. Like that took a lot of time, and it was interesting. That was and it still is, you know, to an extent. It's still something that we do spend a lot of time on.
And how did you do that, Prue? Was that sitting down with the folks who had kind of knocked on your door and said, yeah, we're interested, but we don't really get how this works? You know, how did you go about the awareness raising?
It was a lot of face-to-face, but we actually ended up writing up a few flyers. And so saying, I'm going to send you this before we chat, so you can have a read, digest it, have a think about it, and then, you know, and then have the chat as well. But it was, and like word of mouth is obviously incredibly powerful, especially in a wee market like New Zealand. But again, there's still quite a few misunderstandings of how we operate. So again, that sort of education piece was being key. And, you know, there's a few articles and a few magazines that actually just really secured that understanding, because we had a chance to really delve into it. I guess the other two things I'd say that have been really hard is the steep growth that we've had in 2022 has meant, like, our top table, our key, like we call ourselves Shift HQ. We've grown really fast, and we're in an uplift process at the moment, but our ops and processes are no longer fit for purpose as we grow. So the biggest challenge is to take care of that team and our lawyers, and we need support, but the challenge is to find the right people to fit the team. Culture's king, right? So
absolutely,
that has been that's hard, but it's also kind of exciting, and it's also just kind of taking a pause and getting comfortable with the fact that it's a journey, and that I'm not going to find someone tomorrow and actually that's not the answer, because they might be the wrong person again. So it's kind of really trying to do that in a slightly methodical way.
How do you do that, Prue? I mean, how do you, because the values is, as you know, you've kind of explained and highlighted to us, are so core to your business. I mean, how do you go about finding or recruiting the right lawyers? And the other bit, if I may just add on to that, is, given the nature of your business, how do you encourage them to stay? Because because they have the whole thing that you're creating is that sense of freedom and moving around.
And look, and look, some who stay, like we've got people on their fourth and fifth roles, so some people do stay and they love it, and also some of the roles just go on and on. And so we've got people who, and those people have said, like, I just want to stay, I want to take the summer holidays off, I want to do, you know, like it just suits them. And then there's others that I sort of think about that were never, I'm going to say ours, but they were sort of never with us forever to begin with. So it was kind of a nice mutual need at the time. Like, this isn't particularly in respect to the returners coming back from the UK. The Kiwi market's just got this weird thing about wanting Kiwi experience, even though these people have these incredible CVs. So we're a great stepping stone back into the Kiwi market. And so for those people, it's like, I'm really philosophical. I'm like, we have a need, the client has a need, you can come and get some experience on your CV from New Zealand, and then you'll become a client. And I think it's kind
of it. That's the thinking, isn't it? Right?
It's a wee village. So I think, you know, and there's obviously been the lawyers who've gone, I actually love it in this team and I want to stay there. And I'm like, that is fine. Like, that it is obviously sad for us to lose someone, but I also, in terms of empowerment, I do try and take that same approach when people do that. And so, as I say, there's probably of our suite of lawyers, I think it's probably 40-50% that actually want to stay and keep on the roles, and then there's others that are kind of coming and going. And I think that's kind of been something that we've slowly kind of come to grips with, that is the model.
And how do you manage that, though, particularly in terms of your values and I guess the culture that you're building as well, when you've got a lot of movement in your staffing?
Well, it's sort of the community that we offer. Obviously, it's really important to us and our HQ team, and there's, but some people are not so interested. Some really, it's really important to them, and they come to every event, and we love that. But there's others that it's not so important to, so they like to know it's there and they'll tap into it when they need to. But I think, I mean, our, obviously, like with everyone's key strategic objectives for 2022, it's about retention. I mean, and so absolutely that's ours. But I think for us, it's about caring for the lawyers in the best way we can, and providing them with what we think is much more holistic and not insulting CPD. It's not on liability clauses. It's about well-being. It's about executive leadership, because these people are in a step in their career. So I guess I take a bit more of a longer game than like, you're my employers and I need to keep all of you now, because it's kind of not the way it really operates for us.
It's not the way it really operates anywhere, but you know,
people
but,
like to think it is, right? And I think
yeah.
that's the thing with the people, like, because I think when we first set up and people started taking permanent roles or loving staying where they were, we're like, oh, and now it's like, oh no, it's all good, like it's and there's, and so I feel quite sort of I feel like that is part of the nature of it, is some of it is quite transitory. Being made redundant, you get a restructure, you just want some sort of pocket money for 6 months while you take a breath. And I sort of do encourage the returners in those people who have been made redundant not to jump into the next thing. Like, I come in contract for 6 months.
Yes.
You're and you can take a breath and work out what the next permanent step is. But then there's others who just want a contract. So it's about kind of not making assumptions about people and how they want to work too, because people do have really different drivers. I've completely incorrectly thought a lot of our lawyers would be people in law firms with small children who couldn't do it, and the firms trying to do it part-time, and it's not really been the case at all. Like, it's completely real range, lots of men, lots of people who just want to work in a more portfolio type way.
Absolutely. I wanted to dive into a little bit more for a second about, I guess now that continuum of pre, during and post-COVID, because in your business, that's kind of, you've lived through that. That's kind of been where you effectively, in a way, established, and I'm hoping that we're now well and truly coming out the other end. How has that, and I know we've touched on it, but how has that shaped or influenced your business? And I want to add on to that a little bit more as well, which is, we've been reading in the press quite a lot, and you also touched on it to a slight extent, that, now that we're coming out of COVID, we're just going back to the way that it always was. So I'm just really, really interested in your thoughts about that too.
Yeah, and look, I mean, COVID has really shaped our business, and you're right, because I remember that first one in New Zealand, and one of the banks just stood down all of our contractors. They had to hand in their books and walk home, and we're all like, I remember that panic that day, thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And it all slowed down, and then by the second and third lockdowns, work accelerated. So the pattern was, oh no, you go home and then you suddenly have to do more because people know you're online the whole time. So it has been a real journey for us, navigating that. But I think as we're coming out of it now, the challenge is actually getting people back to the office, because a lot of our people love working at home. And actually, a lot of more than just our shift lawyers, but it is actually kind of taking people on the journey that it's actually the people contact and sitting in with the team, and even just starting a role, like, we're just like, you just need to go in for at least the first couple of weeks and just meet everyone, because then you can you need to build those relationships. So all of that soft skills and kind of getting your head around what an efficient day is, and it's not necessarily sitting at your computer at home, it's actually about nurturing relationships and culture and the team and all of that sort of stuff, where you sort of get home and you think, God, I didn't do any work today, but you did. You probably solved a whole lot of stuff that was going to be 15 emails or 3 Teams calls. You did solve. And also, and it's for us, it's people is our business, and so it's also the client catch-ups and the general sort of BD that we do, like that is our business. So being able to do that in a meaningful way now is great. The other thing, I think, when I look at particularly last August to December, we created quite a few cool initiatives at that time. We created Doing Law Differently, which is a quarterly podcast that we showcase women and men navigating alternative legal career pathways here. We would do it with Kate Shepherd Chambers. It's kind of right up what you guys are doing. And we had Kate Shepherd Chambers, which is a virtual chambers for barristers all over New Zealand. Scovell & Co. do employment stuff. We sort of do this, and the Law Society is now starting to advertise those. So we set that up, and I think that was about collaboration and network, because it's only doing the stuff on your own, and also it's about showing the younger lawyers different ways to practice.
Absolutely,
not just a path to partnership. Like, there's just
absolutely
this aura of different ways to practice, and The other one we set up was the GC network. So we have monthly meetings facilitated by a very senior general counsel of a US listed company. She's, because of COVID, based in New Zealand in the thriving metropolis of Palmerston North. She dials in and facilitates these amazing monthly sessions with a whole lot of newly appointed and sold GCs. There's about 15 to 20 of them. It's a place for them to connect, support, grow. She's really got the awesome kind of quite assertive American approach to things. So they've got to come back and every month report on what they said no to. She says
they got homework.
You have to say no, which is such great homework, and you have to block out 2 hours of your diary so you're available for your team, and just kind of that stuff where you suddenly have stepped into a leadership role, and you're kind of trying to manage that, and so that I mean, I feel really proud of that group, because they are so it's just been so well received. We got to have lunch in person last month, which was awesome. And then when I've also co-founded Regtech NZ, which is the monthly webinars showcasing tech providers and the offshore collaboration projects, which again, it's just about collaboration, but that's become a real thing in New Zealand, and it's very linked to obviously the legal side of our business, but actually, with the labour shortage and the lack of skilled people and the regulatory change, this is something people have to think about. So again, it's just showing those, getting those vendors in front of the right clients as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but there is a bit of a dearth of lawyers in the whole regtech space, I think, isn't there? And it's so important. So just pausing on that for a second, what is that? How do you define regtech for folks that are listening now, obviously in the broader compliance sphere, but what do you talk about? What do you focus on? What's that about?
So I mean, regtech is in a really basic sense, it's about using technology to solve your compliance obligations. So it's about, and you're absolutely right in terms of the lawyers being involved or not, because a lot of these platforms are workflow platforms, and they're about they're sort of automating processes. But what is kind of really key to that is the content and the quality of the content, which is where the lawyers and the compliance people come in. And so we've just recently appointed a regtech consultant to shift compliance. And what her role is that we are talking to businesses, listening to what their pain points are in the regulatory space. Is it AML? Is it privacy? Is it this new conduct bill we've got to do? Whatever it is, listening, and then we go and present them with a bunch of tech providers, and we're agnostic about what tech providers they are, and we're absolutely listening to the right, and we're also very much looking international, because New Zealand is a bit behind others on those providers. But then what we are saying, that what our offering is about, is actually operationalizing that and providing the content and working with our financial services lawyers to ensure that what you're uploading onto that platform is actually right. Because a lot of the clients are looking to regtech for resourcing issues. The compliance and ops teams are stretched, the Great Resignation has increased the staff turnover, and there's legacy systems. They're not fit for purpose, bolt-ons can't work, Excel sheets don't cut the mustard anymore. But they and you've got more scrutiny from the regulators, breaches are more frequent, but you kind of still need that real sort of quality obligation sets of what is the law, what are we trying to comply with, and is that right, and getting that testing of that is something that's a little bit missing, I think, and that's where we're trying to and in terms of our offering, it's actually it's not necessarily templates at all, but it's about having someone to come in and operationalize it with that legal background.
And I think taking the pain, and it is pain for a lot of people, to just wrap your head around how to bring it all together, right? Which would be, I can see that as just being a fabulous resource for people.
I'm really excited about the regtech offering. I do think it's there are no people to throw at the problems, but we also can't keep doing that, because these processes are manual. There's a degree of madness to the way that some of this stuff is done in a business. It's not efficient, and when you've got a pending recession and you've got a labour shortage, technology has to be the answer, but it isn't the answer if you just give it to them, because IT and compliance don't talk. So you need a translator, and that's where I think we're trying to position in the market, that we've got this group of people who have seen across the market the different industries and the different you know, how these different pieces of legislation are being implemented and can kind of operationalize it for you, because you don't have time in your BAU.
Yeah,
People are just
absolutely.
so stretched.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I'm listening to you, I'm kind of thinking, you know, you're a serial entrepreneur, really, with all of these bits going on. Maybe not even serial because they're happening in parallel, but so I'm going to call you a legalpreneur because, you know, we love to use that term. And so with that hat on for a second, and I guess as we start to wrap, what's next for you? What's next for Shift Advisory? But I want to even second part, I want to take that a little bit broader and say, what do you see? What's next for legal in New Zealand and beyond? So I guess on the home front, what's next for Shift? And then looking more broadly, what's next for legal?
I think what's next for Shift is, I've just talked a bit about obviously you can feel my excitement on the RegTech thing. And I think it's so much bigger than just, you know, responsible lending and conduct. It's also about ESG and the D&I stuff. Like, I feel super excited about how we can help, and technology can help kind of really implementing the ESG imperatives. And also, like, I mean, I say this all the time, but, you know, everyone's focusing on the E and the ESG. It's not just about the environment. Like, let's talk about diversity and gender pay reporting and getting women you know, into these particularly male financial services industry, and like really helping businesses do that in a meaningful way. And I think it's the same offering as the RegTech, but it's just on a different, because again, there's templates out there, but it's about making them meaningful to your business. And so I think the ESG and the diversity and inclusion work's really exciting. And so, I mean, we already offer COSEC work out of Shift Compliance, but it's kind of taking that governance and the S and the G, the governance and the social. You can't do environment without meeting the social imperatives of you know, getting some really diversity into these organizations in a meaningful way, not doing the greenwashing or the, you know, tick box and stuff. That's where I feel really excited for him. It's all part of the RegTech to me, but it is, those things are really exciting.
Absolutely.
And then what was your second question?
Where's it going in the broader sense? Like, what do you see? What's on the horizon? Maybe what's the top of or should be at the top of everyone's agenda as we look to 2023 and perhaps even beyond?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's where, and what you guys are doing, and you'll be talking to these providers all the time, but I think in exactly the same way that compliance teams are looking to RegTech, legal teams need to look to legal tech, because again, you can't keep adding humans to these processes and these teams, and you need to be efficient, and you need, like, as people use Guno and Shift and Secondes more and more, you need meta management. Like, you need it to work for you, and you need to work smarter. So, you know, the contract automation, and that was absolutely the genesis for our legal tech and ops series. It was the same offering, right? It's like, we're agnostic to the tech, but like, here are some great solutions, and showing people, because no one's got time to do their homework on what's out there. So I think what's next for legal, in-house legal in particular, and I mean, probably law firms too, it's tech. It's kind of really embracing it in a more meaningful way, and taking the plunge with it, because I think it just feels really scary and overwhelming, and trying to take that scariness out of it is really important to us. I mean, and sort of trying to make sense of it, because it's, you know, it's not the most, we're so used to thinking as lawyers in-house, taking our private practice hat on and just thinking our most useful time is spent in a billable sense on reviewing a contract, but it's not. It's on managing the team, it's on keeping the team, it's on, you know, actually strategic, really high value stuff. You can send your contracts to, you know, get them done quicker, get them reviewed first, like do all that on automation as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me end with this question to you, and it's going to take you back and take you forward, I think. And it's this: if you could have given yourself some advice 3 years ago in relation to your business, what do you know now in a way that you'd wish you'd known then, or what advice would you give yourself now that you wish you could have given yourself then?
probably to slow down.
That's a great one. Okay.
Yeah, probably to just be and just have confidence in the process and the journey, because I think
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a scary thing to be doing your own business, and you can kind of sometimes feel like you're in a race, and it's actually it's not a race. And actually as well, yeah, the whole collaboration thing, I think if I'd, not that I didn't do it at the beginning, but I wasn't as focused on it, whereas like now I'm really focused on the collaboration piece, and the piece, there's just so many pieces to a puzzle to help a client. There's no one solution.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, probably to slow down.
It's a great point to end on. Prue, thank you so much for an absolutely amazing discussion. It is an incredible journey that Shift has been on, and congratulations on building really something quite different. But also just now that it's such a model for others to kind of see and to follow too, I think is just incredible. So just so enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for it.
Thanks, Yuri. Thanks for inviting me along. I really enjoyed being able to pause and reflect. It's been awesome.
That's fabulous. And folks, look, you'll find Shift Advisory if you just kind of do any sort of search, but you'll find Prue and Shift very easy to find on all the normal social media platforms, as indeed you will us as well. So thanks so much, everyone, for being here. Prue, again, an absolute delight. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Bye.
Bye.